Mom and Dad showed my brother a good time on his birthday, but on mine. They gave me a joke box, so I exposed them to each other. I don't think I've ever felt as invisible as I did on the day of my brother's 16th birthday. It wasn't just a birthday. It was like some kind of mega event that you'd expect for someone famous, not just some high school kid. The kind of thing that makes you question if you're really part of the family or just a long-term house guest who's overstayed their welcome. My parents had been planning his birthday for weeks, whispering about party details and shopping trips that they thought I didn't know about. They even enlisted his girlfriend to keep him busy the whole day so they could set up the surprise without him sniffing it out. I mean, they went all out. We're talking banners, a mountain of gifts, and enough food to feed an army of hungry teenagers. And yeah, it was all for him. The day of the big bash, our house transformed into Party Central. By 2 p.m., our backyard looked like some festival ground. There were strings of lights hanging from every possible point, balloons bobbing in the breeze, and a playlist thumping through speakers that could probably be heard a block away. They even rented one of those fancy photo booths, complete with props and a custom backdrop that read, "Happy 16th, champ." I guess subtlety was off the menu. As the guests started arriving, I hung back, trying not to get in the way. It wasn't like I was needed for anything. My parents were buzzing around, playing the perfect hosts. Mom was all smiles, flitting from one group to another, making sure everyone had what they needed. Dad was manning the grill, flipping burgers like his life depended on it. And there, in the middle of it all, was my brother, the star of the show, laughing and soaking in every second of attention. He had friends over that I'd never seen before, people who came up to him with big grins and even bigger presents. They talked about games, girls, and all the stuff I guess normal teenagers talk about. Watching them, I couldn't help but feel a pang of something. Envy, maybe. Resentment? Definitely. Later, as the sun began to dip below the horizon and the backyard lights cast long shadows on the ground, the highlight of the party kicked in, a surprise unveiling of a brand new gaming console, the PS5. It was the one thing he hadn't stopped talking about since it was first announced. And there it was in his hands as he looked genuinely shocked for the first time that day. I remember thinking how nice it must be to be the one who always gets what they want, how it must feel to have our parents bend over backward to make sure you're happy. And there I was, just a spectator in my own home, clapping along and putting on a smile, trying to look like I was part of the celebration. When it was time for the cake, everyone gathered around, singing at the top of their lungs. My mom brought out this huge, elaborate cake, something straight out of a bakery show, with icing that matched the colors of his high school. My brother blew out the candles, everyone cheered, and for a moment, just a brief second, I saw my parents looking at each other with these big, satisfied smiles, like they'd pulled off the greatest thing ever. The party eventually wound down, and the guests started to leave, carting off their share of leftover food and memories. My brother, still buzzing from the excitement and probably the sugar, asked if he could crash at his friend's place for the night. I was in the kitchen, pretending to help clean up, when I overheard my parents agree without a second thought. "Just be careful and have fun," Dad told him, with a pat on the back. That simple exchange was a gut punch. Just like that, he was free to go off and continue his perfect day. Meanwhile, I was stuck at home, cleaning up after a party that wasn't even for me, knowing full well that kind of freedom was off limits in my case. The next morning, my brother came home, his clothes reeking of booze, a crooked smile plastered on his face as he recounted his adventures to our parents, who just laughed it off. "Boys will be boys," I heard Dad chuckle, shaking his head. "Boys will be boys. But what about me? When did I get to be just a kid without the constant reminders that I wasn't as valued?" It was a question I'd asked myself a lot, but it stung a little more each time I thought about it, especially after seeing the lengths they'd gone to for him, compared to the complete indifference they showed for anything that mattered to me. My birthday was a couple of weeks away, and deep down, I knew better than to expect anything close to what my brother got. But still, part of me hoped maybe this year would be different. Maybe this year they'd surprise me. Spoiler alert, they did surprise me, but not in the way anyone would ever want. The thing about living in a house where you're treated more like an afterthought is that every day feels a bit like you're just trying to stay out of the way. It's not like I was expecting fanfare and applause just for existing, but, a little acknowledgement that I'm not just a piece of furniture would have been nice. Take mornings, for instance. Every school day it was like a small battle just to get a decent breakfast. My brother, of course, had it different. Mom would make sure he had a hearty meal, eggs the way he liked, bacon crispy, and sometimes even pancakes if he was up early enough. Me? I was lucky if there were leftovers or, more often, just a cold bowl of cereal waiting on the counter. If the milk wasn't sour, I'd count it as a win for the day. And then there was the school drop-off. Dad would always drive my brother, saying it was on his way to work anyway. They'd chat about sports, what my brother was up to at school, his friends, the usual father-son stuff. Me, I walked. Rain or shine didn't matter. The school wasn't ridiculously far, but far enough that walking there every morning wasn't exactly a joy, especially during winter. Dad said it was good for my health, building character and all that. Funny how those character-building exercises never applied to my brother. Homework was another battlefield. My parents always had time to help my brother with his. They'd sit with him at the dining table, going over math problems or helping draft his essays. If he was struggling, they'd sometimes stay up late, making sure he understood everything before his tests. Me? I learned pretty early that Google was going to be my tutor. Asking for help usually got me a "figure it out, you're smart enough," or a "can't you see we're busy?" So I did figure it out, mostly on my own. And let's not even start on the extracurriculars. My brother was signed up for everything he showed the slightest interest in: soccer, basketball, guitar lessons. You name it, they made sure he had a chance to explore it. They said it was about broadening his horizons and finding his passions. I asked once if I could join a drama club that met after school. The answer was a flat no. Something about not having the time to manage all those activities and how someone needed to be home to help with chores anyway. Speaking of chores, guess who got the bulk of them? If you said me, you'd be right on the money. It was like I was the designated cleaner, dishwasher, and sometimes even cook, especially if both parents were working late. My brother? Well, his job was to keep his grades up and stay out of trouble. Apparently, everything else was too much of a distraction for his budding potential. Family outings were rare, but when they happened, they were all about what my brother wanted to do. Going to the movies meant watching whatever blockbuster action flick he was interested in. Eating out was choosing from his favorite restaurants. I can't remember a time when they asked me what I wanted to do or eat. It was like my preferences were just automatically sidelined. Even simple things like shopping for clothes turned into an ordeal. Shopping trips with my brother were these long, drawn-out affairs where my parents would fuss over him, making sure he got the trendiest outfits, the best shoes. When it came to me, it was always about being practical, choosing whatever was on sale and hurrying up because we didn't have all day. It wasn't just the big things. It was all these little moments that added up, making it clear that in my parents' eyes, I just didn't measure up the same way my brother did. I tried not to let it get to me, tried to brush it off as just the way things were, but it's hard not to feel the sting of rejection from your own parents. I remember one evening trying to talk to them about how I felt. I'd been gearing up for it all day, practicing in my head what I'd say. The living room seemed like neutral ground, so after dinner, I brought it up. I told them I felt like they didn't care about me as much as they did my brother. I can still hear the dismissive tone in my mom's voice as she told me I was being ridiculously dramatic, and that I should be grateful for everything I had. Dad didn't say much, just agreed with whatever Mom said and went back to watching TV. That conversation ended with me feeling smaller than I had before. It was a punch to the gut, realizing that my feelings were just another inconvenience to them. Nights were the hardest. Lying in bed, listening to the quiet of the house, I'd feel this hollow sensation in my chest. It was like I was mourning something I never really had, the warmth of a family that saw me as an equal member. I'd drift off to sleep on those thoughts, wishing for a different reality where I wasn't the second choice, the backup plan, or the afterthought. But wishes were just that, wishes. Reality was the bedroom I lay in, the house I walked through, and the family I lived with. And in that reality, I was always going to be the one looking in from the outside, trying to find a way to fit into a picture that seemed to have no place for me. Despite the clear favoritism my parents showed towards my brother, our relationship somehow managed to avoid the typical sibling rivalry. Maybe it was because he knew, deep down, how unfairly I was treated. Or maybe he just genuinely felt bad for me. Either way, he wasn't like the others. He didn't lord it over me that he was the golden child. Instead, he tried to make things right in small, subtle ways. Ways that I couldn't help but appreciate. It started with the little things. Like the time I mentioned offhandedly that I liked a certain band. I didn't think much of it, just a comment during dinner about a song I heard on the radio. But a week later, my brother handed me a CD, the band's latest album. He'd bought it with his own money, just because he remembered I liked them. It was a simple gesture, but it meant the world to me. It was proof that someone in the house was listening, someone cared about what I liked. Then there were the late-night snacks. I wasn't allowed to stay up late, unlike my brother, who seemed to have no curfew at all. But on nights when he knew I was up studying or just couldn't sleep, he'd sneak down to the kitchen and bring back a stash of snacks, chips, cookies, sometimes even a soda. We'd sit in my room, cross-legged on the floor, munching away as he told me about his day, the good parts and the bad. Those moments, those midnight confessions, they made me feel like I wasn't so alone in that house. And it wasn't just snacks or CDs. My brother had this way of including me that felt so natural, so brotherly. He'd invite me to hang out with him and his friends occasionally, even though I knew they weren't thrilled about having his younger sibling tag along. But he'd insist, "Come on, it'll be fun. You'll like my friends. They're cool." And sometimes, I actually did have fun. I got glimpses of what it was like to be a part of his world, a world where I was welcomed and not just tolerated. His world was so different from mine, even though we lived under the same roof. He was popular at school, always invited to parties, always in the loop about whatever was happening. I, on the other hand, was more of a loner. I had a few close friends, but I wasn't part of any clique or group. I was just me, and most of the time, that felt like it wasn't enough. Not for my parents, not for the cool kids at school, sometimes not even for myself. But my brother never made me feel like I was less. If anything, he went out of his way to make sure I got some of the experiences I was denied by our parents. Like the time I really wanted to go to a concert. It was a school night, and I knew my parents would never let me go. But my brother, he came up with a plan. He told them he was the one who wanted to go, that it was important for some school project. Of course, they said yes to him, they always did. And then he took me with him. We lied, said I was staying over at a friend's house, but really, we were at the concert, jumping and yelling to the music, just being normal teenagers for once. It was one of the best nights of my life, and it wouldn't have happened without him. He knew how much it meant to me, and he made it happen, even if it meant bending the rules a bit. That night, as we drove home, with our ears still ringing from the music, I looked over at him and realized how lucky I was to have him as my brother. He might have been the favorite, but he didn't act like it. He acted like a brother should, protective, caring, and a little bit conspiratorial. Even with things as simple as sharing his gadgets and games, he was generous. When he got the new gaming console for his birthday, the one our parents had made such a big deal about, he didn't keep it to himself. He shared it with me, let me play whenever I wanted. He'd even sit and watch, giving me tips, cheering me on when I beat a level that had been giving me trouble. And when I really wanted those neon lights for my room, the ones all my friends were showing off on Snapchat, he was the one who talked our parents into it. They never would have agreed if I'd asked. But my brother, he had a way of getting them to listen, to agree to things they otherwise wouldn't. He told them it was for his room, that he wanted to try out something new with his decor. They bought it, and a week later, he passed the lights on to me, winking as he said, "I don't really like them anyway. Too flashy for me." It's weird, having this dual life where in one part you're ignored and in another, you're secretly supported by the very person who's given everything you're denied. It created this bond between us, a bond that was about more than just being siblings. It was about understanding each other's struggles, about supporting each other in the ways we could. Living under the same roof but in completely different worlds had been my reality for as long as I could remember. Sure, my brother threw me scraps of normalcy every now and then, like sharing his gaming console or sneaking me out to concerts, but those moments, as precious as they were, couldn't completely shield me from the bitterness that was brewing inside me. It was like every kind gesture from him was just a reminder of what I wasn't getting from my parents. Each act of sibling solidarity was just a patch on the gaping hole of neglect I felt from the two people who were supposed to care about me the most. It wasn't fair, and that unfairness began to ferment into something dark and heavy, a resentment that settled in the pit of my stomach, growing heavier with each passing day. The whole thing might sound petty to someone on the outside. I had a roof over my head, didn't I? Food on the table, clothes on my back. But it's hard to explain how deep the hurt goes when the very people who brought you into this world treat you like you're a permanent guest in their lives, not a family member. And not just any guest, a tolerated one at best. As my 15th birthday approached, the weight of my parents' indifference was especially crushing. I was another year older, another year stuck in this emotional limbo, and I couldn't help but think back to my brother's 16th birthday. The big party, the laughter, the way our parents had looked at him with so much pride and joy. Would I ever get that from them? A part of me knew better than to hope, but there was another part, a stupid, stubborn part, that wanted to believe this year might be different. I remember lying in bed the night before my birthday, staring at the ceiling and listening to the quiet of the house. Everyone was asleep, but I was wide awake, my mind racing with a mix of hope and dread. What if they surprised me this year? What if they had something special planned and were just really good at keeping it a secret? Yeah, right. My inner cynic snorted at the thought. The morning of my birthday, I woke up with a nervous energy buzzing through me. I got dressed, my movements robotic, and my thoughts scattered. I made my way downstairs, the smell of coffee and the sound of morning news drifting from the kitchen. My parents were there, acting like it was just another day. No happy birthday, no smiles, just the usual morning routine. I poured myself a bowl of cereal, the milk thankfully not sour today, and sat at the table trying to gauge their moods. They seemed relaxed, chatting about some trivial thing or another. This was my moment, I decided. I'd test the waters, see if they remembered, see if they cared. I was thinking, I started, my voice steady despite the jittery feeling in my stomach. Since it's my birthday, maybe I could go hang out with Jess after school? She planned something small, just a few friends. My mom looked up from her coffee, her expression unreadable. Oh, it's your birthday, right? Well, we thought about it and… She trailed off, glancing at my dad. My heart skipped. They thought about it? That was more than I expected. I dared to hope, just a little. We got you something, my dad chimed in, his tone light, maybe even a bit teasing. He got up and left the room, only to return a minute later with a large box wrapped in shiny happy birthday paper. My name was scrawled across it in bold letters. My heart was pounding as he set the box down in front of me. This was it. They remembered. They did something. I tore into the wrapping, excitement bubbling up inside me, only to find another box, and then another. Each box was smaller than the last, a Russian nesting doll game that left me more puzzled with each layer. Finally, the last box, small enough to fit in the palm of my hand, came into view. I opened it, my fingers trembling slightly, only to be met with a burst of glitter that flew up into my face. A glitter bomb. The laughter that followed wasn't the warm, joyful kind. It was hollow, mocking. My heart sank. This was their idea of a birthday present? A joke? My eyes stung, not from the glitter, but from the tears that threatened to spill over. I looked up at them, my vision blurred, my voice shaky. Is this some kind of joke? My mom's face hardened. It's not a joke. It's creative. You should learn to take a joke anyway. Lighten up. My dad nodded, his face impassive. Yeah, lighten up. It's not like you need anything anyway. Their words were like slaps, dismissive and cold. I pushed the boxes away, my appetite gone, my day ruined. This wasn't just about a birthday gone wrong. This was a glaring confirmation of everything I felt. Neglected, unloved, unwanted. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the tile floor. Thanks for nothing, I muttered, my voice choked with emotion. I left the kitchen, left them sitting there, and walked out the door to school. The walk to school was longer that day, or maybe it just felt that way because of the weight I was carrying. Each step was a reminder of the gap between me and my parents, a gap that seemed to widen with every birthday, every dismissed feeling, every moment of indifference. By the time I reached school, I had made a decision. I couldn't keep doing this, couldn't keep hoping for something that would never come. It was time to start thinking about revenge, about making them feel even a fraction of the pain they'd made me feel. Not today, maybe not tomorrow, but soon. I needed to protect myself, to fight back in whatever way I could, because if they weren't going to give me the love I deserved, maybe I could at least make them regret how they'd treated me. After the birthday disaster, my school day was a blur of anger and plotting. Each class was just background noise to the thoughts racing through my head. How could they? Why would they? The hurt from the glitter bomb fiasco was deep, but it sparked something in me, a fiery resolve I hadn't felt before. I was done being the victim. By the time the final bell rang, I had a plan. Not fully formed, maybe a bit reckless, but it was a plan nonetheless. I wasn't going to let them off the hook this time. They needed a wake-up call, and I was more than ready to be the alarm. Walking home, I rehearsed what I would say, how I would confront them. My heart pounded with a mix of nerves and excitement. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about claiming some respect, some acknowledgement of the pain they'd caused. I got home to find the house unusually quiet. My parents were both there, which was rare given their usually conflicting schedules. They were in the kitchen, looking like they were gearing up to start dinner. Perfect timing. Hey, I started, my voice steady despite the butterflies doing acrobatics in my stomach. They both turned, surprise etched on their faces. Probably didn't expect me back so soon. We need to talk, I said, closing the door behind me with a click that sounded like a gunshot in the silence. They exchanged a look, a silent conversation that I wasn't privy to, but I didn't care. I was going through with this. What's on your mind? My dad asked, his tone cautious. I took a deep breath. This was it. I'm tired, I began, my words clipped. Tired of being treated like I don't matter, like I'm less important than him. I gestured vaguely upstairs, where my brother was probably holed up in his room. My mom's expression hardened. Here we go again, always so dramatic. No, I cut her off, my voice sharper than I intended. Not this time. You don't get to dismiss me. Not today. I locked eyes with her, holding her gaze to show I meant business. I deserve better than a glitter bomb for my birthday. I deserve better than being an afterthought in my own home. And I'm sick of it. Sick of all of it. The words tumbled out, fueled by every ounce of hurt and resentment I'd stored up over the years. There was a tense silence. Then my dad sighed, running a hand through his hair. We thought it was funny. We didn't mean anything by it. Funny? I scoffed. Is that what you think this is about? A bad joke? I shook my head, disbelief coloring my tone. This is about how you treat me every day. How you've always treated me. My mom crossed her arms defensive. We provide for you, give you everything you need. You're just ungrateful. Ungrateful? The word hit me like a slap. Ungrateful for what? Being ignored? Being second best? I laughed, bitter and hard. Yeah, I'm real ungrateful. The air was thick with tension, each of us caught in a standoff. I could see the confusion, maybe even a hint of guilt in their eyes, but I wasn't done. Not yet. And you know what? I continued, the words coming easier now. I've kept secrets too. Like the time I caught Mom kissing one of Dad's friends at my brother's basketball game. Remember that? I do. I watched the color drain from her face, watched as my dad's confusion turned to shock. What are you talking about? My dad asked, his voice low, dangerous. Oh, it happened. While you were both so busy being perfect parents to him, your wife was making out with another man. How's that for family values? My mom's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. She looked to my dad, who was staring at her with an expression I couldn't quite read. And Dad, I turned to him, my gaze cold. Let's not forget the adult movies I found on the computer last week. Really educational stuff, you know? Great for a school project. Now it was his turn to go pale. That's enough, he said, his voice tight. You have no right. I have every right, I snapped back. You made me feel like I have no place here, so why should I play nice? Why should I keep your secrets when you can't even remember my birthday? The room was spinning with accusations and hurt feelings, a toxic cloud that had been brewing for far too long. I had laid everything out, all the cards on the table, and it felt terrifying, exhilarating and terrifying. Then I laughed like a maniac and ran out of the house. I still remember the shocked expressions after what I said. Now I'm at school, and I'm really scared of going back home. And even though the thought of what they might do after I revealed those things is scary, my anger is still not satisfied, and I want to hurt them even more. Should I just not go back? Or should I talk to my brother and ask his help? Maybe I should actually just go all the way and plot my revenge for all the times they treated me like shit and just be done with it. After all, it's a guarantee that I'm going to be punished for my behavior. So why not do more harm, and then get punished? Or maybe I should keep my mouth shut and just try to get through 3 more years of hell and focus on getting into a good college and building my own life. Update 1. Hey everyone, I really can't thank you enough for all the support and good vibes you've sent my way through your messages and comments. It's been a bit of a lifeline during what's easily one of the toughest times I've faced. I haven't updated sooner because honestly things have just been way too much, and up until recently I didn't even have access to my phone. Let me backtrack a bit and fill you in on the chaos that's been my life lately. So after my last post, I came home to find out that my parents had a huge blow-up. My brother, who was home at the time, filled me in because by the time I got there, the storm had already hit. My dad had been harboring suspicions about my mom having an affair, and something I accidentally let slip ended up being the last piece of the puzzle he needed to confirm his fears. That night, my dad didn't come home, and my mom was livid. In her anger, she took it out on me, grounding me indefinitely and confiscating my phone, effectively cutting me off from everyone. She was so furious she even banned my brother from helping me out and threatened to take his phone too if he tried to pull any stunts to aid me. Despite the severity of the lockdown, thankfully, she didn't get violent, but I was pretty much left to stew in minimal contact with the outside world. Fast forward to now, I just got my phone back after what felt like an eternity. My dad decided to move out a few days back, saying he needed space to think things through, which has just added to the already heavy and gloomy atmosphere at home. After some time to reflect, I realized that plotting revenge or any kind of payback was just going to make things worse for me. Being isolated from everyone for over a week made me see that any more punishment from their side could really break me. So I've decided to just keep my head down and try to get through the rest of high school as quietly as possible. Many of you reached out through DMs, and I'm sorry I couldn't respond sooner. Everything felt like it was crashing down, and I was barely keeping it together. The escalation at home was unbearable at times. My parents' arguments turned frequent and highly volatile, often breaking the silence of the night. It got so bad that there were nights when I was genuinely scared, sneaking into my brother's room, where we'd both plug into the same pair of headphones, blaring music just to drown out the noise of their fighting. Now, with my parents living separately, there's this strange, tense quiet that's almost as bad as the arguments. I overheard my mom saying she's putting off the divorce because she thinks fighting for custody would be too much hassle, especially since my brother and I are close to becoming adults. They're planning to wait until I turn 18 to legally separate, which isn't too far off, but it feels like a lifetime away when every day is strained. I'm not even sure how to feel about all this. On one hand, it might mean fewer explosive fights, but on the other, it feels like my family is just disintegrating before my eyes. And right in the middle of all this was my 16th birthday. Yeah, that was a day to remember, but for all the wrong reasons. It's a birthday I won't forget, not because it was special, but because it marked the realization that nothing's going to be the same. It's tough, not going to lie. Some days are harder than others, and sometimes I feel like I'm just going through the motions, waiting for a day when things might start to look up. But sharing this with you all here helps. It makes me feel less alone, knowing there are people out there who, even though we've never met, genuinely care and understand. I'll keep you all updated as things hopefully start to improve, or at least stabilize. For now, I'm just trying to focus on the positives, like planning for my future and trying to find moments of normalcy amid the chaos. Thanks again for sticking with me through this. Your words of encouragement have been a huge comfort. Here's hoping I'll have some better news to share next time. My mom left me with my evil stepdad and he kicked me out. 5 years later, they came to me for help, and I told them this. I was 10 when my world flipped upside down, not because I did anything wrong, but because life just has a way of throwing you curveballs. My dad had been the center of my world, the guy who'd lift me on his shoulders at football games and spend weekends teaching me how to fix just about anything. Then, one rainy Thursday afternoon, he was gone. Just like that, in a car accident that left me and my mom in a fog of disbelief and sorrow. The next couple of years felt like we were stuck in some kind of limbo. Mom was shattered, drifting through her days with a hollowed-out look that made our home feel more like a mausoleum than a place filled with memories of laughter and life. I missed her almost as much as I missed Dad, even though she was right there. Things started to change when I was 12. Mom met Mark at a teacher's conference. She was a math teacher, always passionate about her numbers and equations, and Mark was a counselor at a different school. He had a smile that seemed to bring Mom back to life, and for the first time in years, I saw a flicker of happiness in her eyes. They started dating, and it didn't take long before Mark was coming over for dinner most nights, filling our quiet house with his booming voice and endless sports stories. At first, I tried to like him. I really did. He tried too, awkwardly offering to throw a football around or take me to baseball games. But it always felt forced, like he was checking boxes on how to be a good stepdad. When they got married a year later, right after I turned 13, I remember standing at the back of the crowd, watching Mom laugh and dance, a lighter version of herself that I hadn't seen in years. It was enough to make me swallow any doubts. Maybe this was a good thing. Maybe we could be a family again. But as the weeks turned into months, the facade started to crack. Mark had a way of marking his territory, so to speak. His stuff began to replace the things Dad had left behind. His golf clubs in the closet where Dad's old fishing gear used to be, his modern art on the walls where Dad's photos of us used to hang. It wasn't just physical space he was taking over, it was everything. Our routines, our traditions, they all started to morph into what Mark wanted. He was subtle at first with his comments. A joke here about my still childish bedroom wallpaper. A comment there about how a real man would start pulling his weight around the house. I was 13, trying to navigate school, grief, and now this stranger critiquing every part of my existence. I remember one evening, I was finishing up a model airplane, something Dad and I had started together. Mark walked in, took one look at it, and laughed. "You're still playing with toys?" he scoffed. "Why don't you do something useful instead?" His words felt like a slap, dismissing not just what I was doing, but dismissing Dad, dismissing me. Mom saw it happen. I saw the flicker of pain in her eyes, but then she smoothed it over with a laugh. "Mark's just teasing," she said, pulling me into a side hug. "Why don't you show him that school project you were working on? I bet he'd love to see what you've accomplished." It was always like that. She was mediating, smoothing things over, asking me to be the bigger person. And I tried, really. I did. I changed the wallpaper, took on more chores, tried to talk about sports and cars, things Mark liked. But nothing changed the fact that I wasn't his, and he made sure I knew it. The worst part was feeling like I was losing Mom all over again. She was there, but she wasn't. She'd side with Mark, or she'd dismiss my feelings, telling me I was being too sensitive or that I needed to give him a chance. When you're older, you'll understand, she'd say. Mark wants what's best for us. He's trying in his own way. But his way felt like erasing who I was, erasing Dad from our lives. I spent more time in my room, more time at friends' houses, anywhere I could feel normal, anywhere I could breathe. When I turned 15, things got tougher. I got a part-time job at a local grocery store, thinking I could start saving for a car, maybe college. That's when Mark decided I should start paying rent. It's time you learn about real life, he told me one night at dinner, a stern look on his face. You want to act grown up? You can start by contributing like one. Mom hesitated. I saw it in her eyes, but then she nodded. It might be good for you, she said. Teach you some responsibility. So there went half my paycheck into Mark's hands every month. It wasn't just the money, it was the principle. It was the feeling of being pushed out, slowly but surely. The day Mom told me about her job opportunity in Europe, I felt a mix of pride and sheer panic. 6 months. 6 months with Mark, without her. She was so excited, so hopeful. I didn't want to burst her bubble, didn't want to be the reason her spark faded again. But living with Mark without her there as a buffer, I was terrified. I told her about some of the things he'd done, the comments, the way he'd make me feel small. He's just strict, she said, brushing off my fears. You'll see, it'll be good for both of you. You'll find a way to get along. I knew better. I knew there was no getting along with someone who didn't want me there in the first place. But I nodded, kept my objections to myself, and helped her pack. When we drove her to the airport, I felt like I was watching my last lifeline disappear into the clouds. The ride back home was silent, heavy. Mark's hand on my shoulder wasn't comforting. It was a reminder of the weight about to press down on me. Things are going to change, he said, his voice low, almost a whisper. And I knew they would, just not in the way Mom hoped they would. With Mom gone, the house felt different, colder, emptier. Mark's presence loomed larger without her there to soften his sharp edges. I remember thinking that first night, staring at the ceiling in my room, that it was going to be a long 6 months. I wasn't wrong. Mark wasted no time establishing his new rules. The morning after Mom left, he laid them out at breakfast, a list he must have been preparing for weeks. Curfews were stricter, chores were doubled, and any minor slip-up was met with a disproportionate amount of criticism. The worst part? He decided that my time on the computer or phone would be limited, only an hour a day, because he believed technology was making me lazy. It wasn't just about control. It was as if he was trying to reshape me into someone else, someone more to his liking, quiet, submissive, invisible. Any attempt I made to argue or explain was quickly shut down with a harsh, "My house, my rules." One evening, I was finishing up my homework in the living room, math, my worst subject. Mark was watching a football game, yelling at the TV as his team fumbled yet again. I tried to focus on the equations in front of me, but the noise was too much. "Can you maybe turn it down a bit?" I asked, my voice hesitant. It was a simple request, one I hoped he'd understand given the stack of books around me. He turned to me, his face twisted in annoyance. "This is the only time I get to relax. You can go study in your room." "My lamp broke. I don't have enough light in there," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. Mark scoffed, turning back to the game. "Sounds like a you problem. Be more careful next time." But it wasn't that I had been careless. He knew that. The lamp was one of the many things that had mysteriously stopped working or gone missing since he'd started ruling the house with his iron fist. It was his passive-aggressive way of telling me that even my space wasn't mine anymore. As the days turned into weeks, the house felt smaller, the air thicker. I spent more time out, staying late at school, hanging out at the library, anywhere but home. It wasn't a solution, but it was a temporary escape from the constant tension. Then came the incident with my bike. It was an old thing, a hand-me-down from my dad, but it was mine, and it was freedom. One Saturday, I planned to meet a couple of friends at the park. I went to the shed to get my bike, only to find it wasn't there. Panicked, I searched around before confronting Mark, who was in the garage, tinkering with his car. "Do you know where my bike is?" I asked, my heart pounding. "Oh, that old thing?" He didn't even bother looking up. "I gave it away. You're too old for that junk. It was taking up space." "You gave it away?" My voice cracked. "It was mine. You can't just give away my stuff." Mark finally looked at me, his expression cold and unyielding. I can and I did. You need to grow up and stop clinging to your childish things. Besides, it's my garage. I decide what stays and what goes. I remember feeling so powerless, so small. That bike wasn't just a bike. It was one of the last pieces of my dad I had left. But arguing with Mark was futile. He'd made that clear. So I walked away, fists clenched, the loss of the bike feeling like another link to my dad severed. My friends were sympathetic when I told them what happened. They tried to cheer me up, but the damage was done. It wasn't just about the bike. It was about every little thing that Mark did to erase my presence, my past, my identity. School became my only solace, and even that was becoming difficult. My grades, once decent, began to slip. Teachers noticed, asked questions, but what could I tell them? That my stepdad was a tyrant? That I was miserable? I kept to myself, mumbled something about being tired, and promised to try harder. The situation at home reached a boiling point one evening over something trivial: dinner. Mark had decided to cook, something he rarely did, and he expected gratitude and praise for his efforts. The meal was fine, but I wasn't in the mood to play the part of the grateful son. I was quiet, ate without comment, and that set him off. "You ungrateful little brat," he hissed as he cleared the dishes. "I go out of my way to make a nice dinner and you can't even muster a thank you?" I looked up, surprised by his anger over such a small thing. "It was good," I said, trying to keep the peace. "Thank you." But it was too late. He was already ranting about respect, about how kids these days have no appreciation for what they're given. "I'm not asking for much, just a little respect," he went on, his voice rising with every word. "But you? You're just like your father, selfish, ungrateful. You think the world owes you something." The mention of my dad was a low blow, and it hit hard. Tears stung my eyes, but I fought them back. "Don't talk about my dad," I managed to say, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Mark sneered. "Why? Can't handle the truth?" "I'm going to my room," I said, standing up. I needed to get away, to breathe. "Yeah, run away, that's what you're good at," he called after me as I walked away. That night, lying in the dark of my room, I realized that this wasn't going to get better. Not in a week, not in 6 months. Mark had made this home a battlefield, and I was always going to be the enemy. The weeks that followed were a relentless grind. Every day felt like a marathon, a test of endurance. Mark's mood swings were unpredictable. One moment he was eerily calm, and the next, he was a storm of anger over the smallest things. Living with him was like walking through a minefield. You never knew what would set him off. One of the new rules Mark instituted was a check-in system. I had to text him the moment school ended, the second I left work, and right when I was on my way home. If I missed a check-in, or if I was late by even a few minutes, there would be hell to pay. He said it was about safety, about being responsible, but I knew better. It was about control. My job at the grocery store became my escape, a few hours each day where I didn't have to think about home. My manager, Mr. Jensen, noticed the long hours I was putting in and started giving me more responsibilities. "You're a hard worker, Tom," he'd say, clapping me on the back. "Reliable. That's rare these days." The praise felt good, but also sad in a way, because I knew I was only working so much to avoid going home. One particularly rough day, I got held up at work. A late delivery threw everything off schedule, and I missed my check-in time with Mark by 15 minutes. I realized it as I was rushing out the door, my phone buzzing with missed calls and texts. "Where are you? Are you ignoring me? Call me now!" The messages escalated in anger, and a knot of anxiety tightened in my stomach. I called him, the phone shaking in my hand. "Where the hell have you been?" Mark's voice was a mix of fury and ice. "I'm sorry, there was a delay at work. I couldn't—" "Excuses," he cut me off. "You have responsibilities, Tom. You think the world stops because you're busy? You're supposed to be home an hour ago." "I know, I'm sorry, it won't happen again," I stammered, the familiar feeling of dread settling in. "It better not," he snapped, and hung up. The ride home was a blur of streetlights and shadows, my mind racing with what awaited me. When I got home, Mark was waiting in the living room, his expression stormy. "Sit down," he ordered, pointing to the couch. "We're going to have a talk about respect and responsibility." He grabbed a box of my things, old photos, my dad's watch, some school mementos, and threatened to throw them out. I pleaded with him to stop, and in the struggle, the box fell, and its contents scattered across the floor. As I scrambled to pick up my belongings, Mark towered over me. "This ends now," he growled. "I want you out of my house by tomorrow, or I'll throw you out myself." That was the last straw. I realized I couldn't take it anymore. Once Mark went to bed, I packed a bag with essentials and left in the middle of the night. I crashed at my best friend's place for a few days before finding a small room to rent with my savings from my part-time job. I didn't tell my mom immediately because I didn't want to worry her or jeopardize her job opportunity. I figured I'd explain everything when she got back. I blocked Mark's number because he kept sending me threatening messages, saying he'd call the police and report me as a runaway if I didn't come back. It's been a month now, and I'm managing on my own. It's not easy. I'm working extra hours to cover rent and basic necessities while trying to keep up with school. Some days I barely have enough to eat, but it's still better than living under Mark's roof. I feel guilty for leaving without telling my mom, but I also feel like I had no choice. The constant fear and stress were crushing me. So, Reddit, am I the a-hole for leaving my stepfather's house while my mom was abroad? Should I have tried harder to make things work? Should I reach out to my mom now and explain everything I'm lost and could really use some advice? Edit. Thank you all for your responses. I've read through them and appreciate the support. Many of you have asked about my living situation and future plans. I'm currently staying in a small studio apartment that I found through a friend of a friend. It's not ideal. The plumbing is temperamental and I can hear every move my neighbors make, but it's safe and affordable. I'm working part-time at a local diner and doing some online tutoring to make ends meet. As for school, I'm in my senior year and determined to graduate. I've been in touch with my school counselor about my situation, and they've been supportive in helping me stay on track. Some of you suggested reaching out to other family members. Unfortunately, my mom was an only child and my grandparents passed away a few years ago. My dad's side of the family lost touch with us after he died. It's pretty much just been me, my mom and Mark for the past few years. I'm still unsure about how to handle things when my mom returns. Part of me wants to tell her everything, but another part is scared she won't believe me or will side with Mark again. I guess I'll cross that bridge when I come to it. For now, I'm focused on staying afloat and finishing school. Thank you all again for your advice and kind words. Update 1. It's been 6 months since my original post and a lot has happened. I wanted to update you all on the situation. My mom returned from her work trip abroad last week. I was nervous about facing her, but I was also looking forward to finally explaining everything that had happened with Mark. However, things didn't go as I had hoped. The day after she got back, I received a call from her. Her voice was cold and angry, nothing like the warm, loving tone I was used to. She demanded to know if it was true that I had stolen money from Mark and run away. I was shocked and confused. My mind raced, trying to understand where this accusation was coming from. I tried to explain what really happened, how Mark had been verbally abusive, how he had threatened to kick me out, and how I left for my own safety and mental health. I told her about the incident with the box of my belongings, about how Mark had made my life miserable. Every day she was gone, but my mom wouldn't listen. She kept insisting that Mark had shown her evidence of my theft. When I asked what evidence, she was vague, saying something about missing cash and suspicious bank transactions. I told her it was all lies, that I had never stolen anything in my life. I reminded her of how I'd always been honest with her, how I'd worked hard at my part-time job to contribute to the household, but it seemed like her mind was already made up. I begged her to meet me in person so we could talk face to face. After some persuasion, she agreed, but when we met at a local cafe, Mark was with her. The moment I saw him, my heart sank. He had a sorrowful expression on his face, but I could see the triumphant glint in his eyes. Mark put on a show of being concerned and disappointed in me. He spun a tale about how he had tried his best to take care of me while my mom was away, but that I had become rebellious and started stealing money to fund a party lifestyle. He talked about how he'd noticed cash missing from his wallet, how he'd seen suspicious withdrawals from their joint account. I was floored. Every word out of his mouth was a lie, but he told it so convincingly. He even had fake receipts and bank statements that he claimed proved I had been taking money. I don't know how he fabricated them, but they looked real enough to fool my mom. He talked about how he'd tried to confront me about it, but I had run away instead of facing the consequences. I tried desperately to defend myself, to tell my side of the story. I explained how I'd been working extra shifts to support myself, how I'd been struggling to make ends meet in my small apartment. I told him about the nights I'd gone to bed hungry because I couldn't afford both food and rent. I pleaded with my mom to remember how I'd always been responsible with money, how I'd never given her any reason to doubt me before. But Mark had clearly been working on my mom for weeks before she returned. He had poisoned her against me, making her believe I was a troubled, ungrateful kid who had taken advantage of her absence. He painted himself as the victim, a concerned stepfather who had only wanted to help his wayward stepson. The worst part was seeing the look of disappointment and anger in my mom's eyes. She told me she couldn't believe I would do this to her, that she had trusted me to behave while she was gone. When I tried to explain about Mark's behavior, she accused me of trying to shift blame and making up lies about my caring stepfather. "How could you do this to us?" she asked, her voice breaking. "We gave you everything, and this is how you repay us." Her words cut deep, each one feeling like a physical blow. I couldn't understand how she could believe Mark over me, her own son. The meeting ended with my mom telling me she needed time to think about what to do next. She said she couldn't have me back in the house if she couldn't trust me. As they left the cafe, I saw Mark put his arm around my mom's shoulders, comforting her. The sight made me feel sick. Over the next few days, I tried repeatedly to reach out to my mom to get her to listen to me without Mark's influence. But she either ignored my calls or replied with short, cold messages telling me to stop lying and take responsibility for my actions. I was desperate. I reached out to a few of my mom's friends, hoping they might be able to talk some sense into her, but it seemed Mark had gotten to them too. They all told me how disappointed they were in me, how they couldn't believe I would steal from my own family. Eventually, my mom sent me a long text message saying she had decided it was best if I didn't come back home. She said she was deeply disappointed in me and that she needed time to process everything. She told me not to contact her for a while. I was devastated. Not only had I lost my home, but I had also lost my mom, the one person I thought would always be on my side. Mark had managed to manipulate her completely, turning her against her own son. The next few weeks were a blur. I threw myself into work and school, trying to keep my mind off the gaping hole in my life where my family used to be. I had trouble sleeping often, lying awake at night, replaying the conversations in my head, wondering what I could have said differently to make my mom believe me. My grades started to slip again, and I was at risk of not graduate. It took a concerned teacher pulling me aside to snap me out of my funk. She noticed the changes in me and asked what was wrong. After some hesitation, I told her everything. To my surprise, she believed me. She helped me get in touch with a school counselor and a social worker who could provide me with resources and support. With their help, I was able to get back on track with my studies and even secure some additional financial aid to help with my living expenses. Now I'm trying to figure out my next steps. I'm still in my small apartment, working as much as I can to support myself. I've reached out to a few trusted teachers at school who have been supportive and are helping me navigate finishing high school as an independent student. I'm hurt, angry, and scared about the future. The betrayal by my mom stings deeply, and there are days when the loneliness feels overwhelming. But I'm also determined to prove Mark wrong and show my mom the truth someday. I don't know if our relationship will ever be the same, but I haven't given up hope entirely for now. I'm focusing on graduating high school and planning for college. It won't be easy, but I'm determined to build a better life for myself, with or without my family's support. Thank you all for your support on my original post. If anyone has advice on how to move forward from here, I'd really appreciate it. How do I heal from this betrayal? How do I build a life for myself when I feel so alone? Any words of wisdom would be welcome. Update 2. 5 years later, it's been 5 years since my last update, and my life has changed dramatically. I wanted to share what's happened and get some perspective on a recent development. After high school, I threw myself into my studies and work. The pain of losing my family was still raw, but I channeled that hurt into determination. I managed to get a scholarship to a state university majoring in computer science to make ends meet. I juggled multiple part-time jobs working at the university library, doing freelance web design, and even delivering pizzas on weekends. College was challenging, but also liberating. For the first time in years, I felt free from the constant fear and anxiety that had plagued me. Living with Mark. I made friends who became like family to me, and I even started seeing a therapist to work through the trauma of my past. I graduated with honors, landing a job at a promising tech startup right out of college. The work was demanding with long hours and high pressure, but I thrived on the challenge. It felt good to be valued for my skills and work ethic, something I hadn't experienced in a long time. Over the past 3 years, I've worked my way up in the company. I started as a junior developer, but my dedication and innovative ideas caught the attention of the higher-ups. I was promoted to team lead within a year, and recently, I was made lead developer for our main product. Our startup recently secured a huge investment catapulting us into the big leagues of the tech world. With this came a significant salary increase for me, along with stock options that could be worth a substantial amount if the company continues to grow. For the first time in my life, I'm not just financially stable, but comfortable. I bought my first car, moved into a nice apartment, and even started putting money aside for the future. Throughout this time, I had no contact with my mom or Mark. It was hard, especially during holidays and milestones like my college graduation and job promotions. There were nights when I'd lie awake wondering if my mom ever thought about me, if she ever regretted believing Mark over me. But I focused on building a new life for myself and creating a chosen family with close friends and mentors. Last week, out of the blue, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, there was a moment of silence, and then I heard a voice I hadn't heard in 5 years. It was my mom. Her voice sounded tired and desperate, nothing like the confident, loving mom I remembered from my childhood. She told me she and Mark were in financial trouble. Apparently, Mark had made some bad investments and they were facing foreclosure on their house. The company Mark worked for had gone bankrupt, leaving him unemployed for the past year. They had burned through their savings and were now drowning in debt. My mom apologized for everything that had happened years ago. Her voice cracked as she admitted that she had realized over time that Mark had been manipulating her. She said she regretted not believing me, and that the guilt had been eating at her for years. She asked if we could meet to talk things over to try and mend our relationship. I was stunned. For years, I had imagined this moment, my mom realizing the truth, reaching out to reconnect. But now that it was happening, I felt a whirlwind of emotions, hope, anger, sadness, and a lingering sense of betrayal. After a long pause, I agreed to meet her at a cafe, the same one where we had our confrontation 5 years ago. When I arrived, I was surprised to see both my mom and Mark there. My mom looked older and worn down her hair grade, and her face lined with worry. Mark seemed to have lost the arrogant air he once had, his shoulders slumped and his eyes downcast. They explained their situation in more detail. They were months behind on their mortgage payments, and the bank was threatening to take their house. Mark had lost his job when his company folded, and despite trying, he hadn't been able to find steady work since. My mom's salary as a teacher wasn't enough to cover their debts and living expenses. As they talked, I noticed the dynamic between them had changed. My mom seemed more assertive, often cutting Mark off or correcting him. Mark, on the other hand, appeared subdued, a far cry from the domineering man I remembered. Then came the real reason for their reaching out. They asked if I could lend them money to help them get back on their feet. They had heard through mutual acquaintances about my success in the tech industry and thought I might be in a position to help. I sat there listening to their plea, feeling a mix of emotions. Part of me felt vindicated. They were finally admitting that Mark had lied and manipulated the situation years ago. But another part of me was angry that they only reached out when they needed something from me. My mom reached across the table, taking my hand in hers. "I know we don't deserve your help," she said, tears in her eyes. "What we did to you was unforgivable." "But we're desperate. We have nowhere else to turn," Mark chimed in, his voice lacking the confidence it once had. "I know you have every reason to hate me," he said. "I treated you terribly. I let my jealousy and insecurity poison everything. I'm not asking for forgiveness, but I am truly sorry for what I did." Their apologies stirred up old memories and pain. I thought about the lonely nights in my tiny apartment, struggling to make ends meet. I remembered the feeling of betrayal when my own mother chose to believe a lie over her son's truth. After they finished talking, I took a deep breath and told them I needed time to think about it. I left the cafe without making any promises, their pleading eyes following me as I walked away. Now I'm torn. On one hand, I've worked hard for my success, and I don't feel I owe them anything after how they treated me. Mark's lies cost me my relationship with my mom and forced me to fend for myself at a young age. Part of me wants to refuse and let them face the consequences of their actions. On the other hand, despite everything, I still care about my mom. The thought of her being homeless or struggling tugs at my heart. But I'm worried that if I help them, I'll be opening myself up to further manipulation or expectations of ongoing support. I'm also concerned about the impact this could have on my own financial stability. While I'm doing well now, I'm not sure if I can afford to bail them out without compromising my own future. The startup world is volatile, and there's no guarantee my current success will last. There's also the question of forgiveness. Can I truly move past what happened? Is it possible to rebuild a relationship with my mom after such a profound betrayal? And what about Mark? While he apologized, can I ever trust him or have him in my life again? I've spent the last week mulling over these questions, unable to come to a decision. I've talked it over with my closest friends and even brought it up in a session with my therapist. Everyone has different opinions, but ultimately they all say the same thing. It's my decision to make. Part of me is tempted to help to be the bigger person and extend an olive branch. Maybe this could be the first step in healing old wounds and rebuilding my relationship with my mom. But another part of me is scared of being hurt again, of opening myself up to the pain I've worked so hard to overcome. So Reddit, I find myself asking once again, am I the a-hole if I refuse to help my mom and stepdad financially after everything that's happened? Should I give them another chance or protect myself and the life I've built? I'm at a crossroads, and I could really use some outside perspective.